The plastic insulin pen clatters against the kitchen tile, rolling under the refrigerator like my lifeline just vanished into thin air. My mother Linda stands over the garbage disposal, her finger hovering over the switch, 3 empty medication bottles clutched in her other hand. The morning light streaming through our Wauwatosa kitchen window catches the tears on her cheeks, but her jaw is set with that familiar stubborn determination I've learned to fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. You don't need these poisons anymore, Emma, she says, her voice shaking with conviction rather than doubt. I've found a better way. Natural healing, the way God intended our bodies to work. I'm frozen by the breakfast bar, my pre-med textbooks scattered where I'd been studying for my organic chemistry exam. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm learning about pharmaceutical compounds while my own mother destroys the medications keeping me alive. Type 1 diabetes doesn't care about natural healing or divine intervention. Without insulin, my body will literally consume itself trying to process glucose it cannot access. The whole nightmare started 3 weeks ago when I came home for what I thought would be a normal weekend visit. I should have seen the warning signs. The essential oil diffusers appearing in every room. The stack of books on Mom's nightstand with titles like Healing Without Harm and Big Pharma's Deadly Deception. The way she'd started asking pointed questions about my medication routine, her former nursing background giving her just enough medical knowledge to be dangerous. Linda Davis had been a registered nurse for 15 years before she quit 2 years ago. She'd always been the medical expert in our family, the one who could diagnose a strep throat from across the room or spot a concerning mole during a casual conversation. Dad and I trusted her completely when it came to health matters. She was the one who recognized my diabetes symptoms when I was 14, who rushed me to Aurora Medical Center when I was slipping into diabetic ketoacidosis during my freshman year of high school. She saved my life then. Now she's trying to destroy it with the same fierce determination. The transformation began after her own battle with depression following a difficult period at the hospital. She'd been prescribed antidepressants, but the side effects were brutal. Weight gain, sexual dysfunction, emotional numbness that made her feel like a stranger in her own body. When she tried to taper off the medication, the withdrawal symptoms were even worse. That experience shattered her faith in conventional medicine and sent her spiraling into online communities that promised healing through herbs, meditation, and dietary changes. I'm 22 years old, a junior at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee majoring in biology with plans for medical school. I've been managing my diabetes independently for 4 years now, maintaining excellent glucose control through careful carbohydrate counting, regular monitoring, and insulin therapy. My endocrinologist Dr. Martinez calls me a model patient. My A1C levels are consistently in the optimal range. I exercise regularly, eat a balanced diet, and have never had a serious diabetic emergency since that initial diagnosis. But none of that matters to my mother anymore. She's convinced that my diabetes is a result of toxic lifestyle choices and that pharmaceutical companies are keeping me sick for profit. She's spent months researching alternative treatments, joining Facebook groups where parents share stories about curing their children's autoimmune diseases through elimination diets and supplement protocols. The more I try to explain the science behind type 1 diabetes, the more she believes I've been brainwashed by the medical establishment. The garbage disposal roars to life, and I watch 8 years of careful medication management disappear down the drain. My rescue inhaler for exercise-induced asthma. The anxiety medication that helps me sleep through the night without panic attacks about my blood sugar dropping too low. The insulin that literally keeps me alive. All of it ground up and washed away while my mother stands there believing she's saving me. Mom, please, I managed to whisper, but she's already moved on to emptying my glucose meter case, dumping test strips and lancets into the trash with methodical efficiency. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, she snaps, her green eyes blazing with that evangelical fervor that's been growing stronger each week. I understand that my daughter has been poisoning herself for years because some doctor told her she had to. I understand that there are people making millions of dollars keeping you dependent on their chemicals. But I also understand that the human body is capable of healing itself when we stop interfering with synthetic substances. My father Michael is at a conference in Chicago, won't be back until Tuesday. He's been increasingly absent from these conversations anyway, uncomfortable with Linda's new crusade but unwilling to directly contradict her. He's always been the peacekeeper in our family, preferring to avoid conflict rather than take sides. When I called him last week to express my concerns about Mom's behavior, he just sighed and said, "You know how your mother gets when she believes in something. Give her some time to work through it." Time is something I don't have. Without my long-acting insulin, my blood sugar will start climbing within hours. Without my rapid-acting insulin for meals, eating becomes a dangerous gamble. The anxiety medication withdrawal might be manageable, but combined with the stress of fighting my own mother for medical autonomy, I'm looking at a perfect storm of physical and emotional.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Crisis. I've prepared everything you need, Linda continues, pulling a large cardboard box from the pantry. Inside are bottles of supplements, herbal tinctures, and what looks like enough cinnamon capsules to stock a health food store. Chromium picolinate for glucose metabolism. Alpha-lipoic acid for cellular energy. Bitter melon extract, cinnamon bark, gymnema, sylvester. All natural, all proven to support healthy blood sugar levels. I recognize some of these supplements from my nutrition classes. In healthy individuals, some might provide modest benefits for glucose metabolism. But suggesting they can replace insulin therapy in type 1 diabetes is like recommending vitamins for a severed artery. It's not just wrong, it's potentially lethal. Mom, type 1 diabetes isn't like type 2. I try to explain, falling back on the patient education mode I've perfected over years of dealing with well-meaning but uninformed relatives. My pancreas doesn't produce any insulin at all. These supplements might help someone with insulin resistance, but they can't replace the hormone my body can't make. She waves my explanation away like I'm reciting pharmaceutical propaganda. That's what they want you to believe. But I've found dozens of testimonials from people who reversed their diabetes completely using natural protocols. Children, Emma. Children younger than you were when you were diagnosed. The testimonials. I've seen them too, during my own desperate Google searches in the early days after diagnosis. Desperate parents claiming their children no longer need insulin after switching to raw food diets or elimination protocols. What these stories never mention are the hospital remissions, the diabetic ketoacidosis episodes, the long-term complications from poor glucose control. The medical community doesn't publicize these failures because of patient privacy laws, but emergency rooms across the country see the consequences regularly. My phone buzzes with a text from my roommate Jessica. Study group at 3, we could really use your help with the enzyme kinetics section. Normal life continuing while mine implodes in real time. I'm supposed to be back on campus tonight, have my organic chemistry exam on Thursday, need to finish my research proposal for the summer internship program. Instead, I'm standing in my childhood kitchen watching my mother attempt to commit what amounts to medical homicide through misguided love. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Linda says, her voice softening as she notices my tears. I'm doing this because I love you more than anything in this world. Because I can't stand watching you inject yourself with chemicals every day, seeing you worry about blood sugar numbers and carbohydrate counts and all the stress that comes with managing this disease. There's a better way, sweetheart. A way that heals instead of just managing symptoms. The cruel irony is that I believe her love is genuine. That's what makes this betrayal so devastating. She's not motivated by malice or neglect. She truly believes she's saving me from a lifetime of pharmaceutical dependence. But love without understanding can be more dangerous than indifference. Her nursing background gives her just enough medical knowledge to sound credible while being completely wrong about the most fundamental aspects of my condition. I think about Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, my endocrinologist at the University Health Center. She's explained countless times how type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition where the body's immune system destroys the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. It's not caused by diet, lifestyle, or toxic exposure. It's not reversible through natural remedies or positive thinking. It's a genetic predisposition triggered by environmental factors we don't fully understand, resulting in a complete inability to produce insulin. Let me call Dr. Martinez, I suggest, pulling out my phone. Maybe if you could talk to him directly, hear the medical explanation from someone you trust. Dr. Martinez is part of the problem, she responds immediately. He's been prescribing you these medications for years without ever addressing the root cause. Without ever suggesting that there might be alternatives. Do you think that's because he doesn't know about natural treatments, or because he makes more money keeping you sick? The conspiracy thinking has taken root so deeply that any medical professional becomes part of the supposed cover-up. This is the same woman who taught me to trust science, to ask questions, to think critically about health claims. Now she's rejecting decades of medical research in favor of anecdotal testimonials from online forums. My blood sugar is probably already starting to climb. I can feel the familiar thirst beginning, the slight headache that comes with hyperglycemia. Without my continuous glucose monitor, which she also destroyed, I can't even track how quickly I'm deteriorating. The school health center is 40 minutes away, but they won't have my medical records immediately available. The local urgent care clinic might have insulin, but insurance authorization could take hours. What if we compromise? I try desperately. What if I continue my insulin therapy, but also try some of the supplements you've researched? We could work together to find an integrative approach that combines conventional treatment with natural support. For a moment, hope flickers in her eyes. Then her expression hardens again. No, that's exactly how they keep you trapped. They let you think you're making progress with natural methods while the pharmaceutical dependence continues. You have to choose, Emma. Trust the medical industry that profits from your illness, or trust your mother who loves you unconditionally. The false choice she's presenting is heartbreaking in its simplicity. Love versus science, trust versus skepticism, natural versus artificial. But life isn't that binary, and medical conditions don't respond to emotional appeals or wishful thinking. My pancreas doesn't care how much my mother loves me or how much we both want me to be healthy without medication. I'm running out of time and options. My emergency supplies are gone. My backup medications were in the same kit she destroyed. The nearest pharmacy won't dispense insulin without a prescription, and my doctor's office won't be open until Monday. Even if I drive back to campus immediately, I'm looking at hours without medication while my blood sugar climbs steadily higher. I need to call someone, I say, reaching for my phone again. No? Her voice is firm, final. You need to trust the process. The first few days will be difficult as your body adjusts, but I'll be here to support you through it. We'll monitor your symptoms together, adjust the supplement protocol as needed. This is our chance to break free from the pharmaceutical prison they've built around you. She doesn't understand that monitoring symptoms of uncontrolled diabetes means watching for signs of diabetic ketoacidosis. Nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, rapid breathing, confusion, and eventually coma and death. There's no gentle transition period where natural supplements gradually take over insulin's role. There's just a steady deterioration that can become life-threatening within hours. The kitchen feels smaller suddenly, like the walls are closing in. The morning sun that seemed so cheerful earlier now feels harsh and exposing. This is my childhood home, the place where I learned to ride a bike and bake cookies with my grandmother and felt safe and loved. Now it's become a prison where my own mother holds the key to my survival and refuses to turn it. My phone buzzes again. Jessica wondering where I am, whether I need help with anything. Normal college concerns from a normal Sunday morning in a normal life. I want to text back that yes, I need help, that my mother has lost her mind and is trying to kill me with love and good intentions. But how do you explain that the person who brought you into this world is now methodically removing everything keeping you alive? I'm going to prove to you that this works. Linda says, organizing the supplement bottles with the same careful attention she once gave to my insulin supplies. In 3 months you're going to feel better than you have in years. Your energy will improve, your mood will stabilize, your body will remember how to heal itself. And you'll thank me for having the courage to save you from a lifetime of pharmaceutical dependence. 3 months, she thinks I have 3 months to experiment with her natural protocol. I probably have 3 days before I'm in serious medical trouble, maybe less if stress accelerates the process. The gap between her expectations and medical reality is so vast that no amount of explanation seems capable of bridging it. This is where my story really begins. Not with a phone call in the middle of the night, but with a garbage disposal destroying my lifeline while my mother watches with tears of misguided hope. Not with strangers trying to steal my inheritance, but with the person I trust most in the world attempting to save me by destroying everything keeping me alive. What happens next will test every relationship I value, challenge everything I thought I knew about family loyalty, and force me to choose between the mother I love and the medical science I depend on for survival. Because sometimes the people who love us most are capable of the greatest harm, and sometimes saving yourself means breaking the heart of the person who raised you. The insulin pen is still under the refrigerator, just out of reach, like hope itself slipping away one moment at a time. Part 2. The sacrifice. Standing in that kitchen, watching my mother arrange supplement bottles like she's preparing for battle, I realize the full scope of what I'm about to lose. It's not just the medications scattered across our tile floor or ground up in the garbage disposal. It's everything I've built over the past 4 years at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, everything I've worked towards since my diagnosis 8 years ago. My organic chemistry exam is Thursday morning. Professor Williams doesn't give makeup exams except for documented medical emergencies, and somehow I doubt my mother destroyed my diabetes medication because she thinks supplements will cure me. Qualifies as acceptable documentation. I've maintained a 3.8 GPA specifically to position myself for medical school applications this fall. Missing this exam could drop my grade to a B, or worse, jeopardizing my chances at the competitive programs I've been targeting. The research internship at the Medical College of Wisconsin starts in 6 weeks. Dr. Harrison's lab is working on novel insulin delivery systems, ironically enough. I've been looking forward to this opportunity for months, knowing that hands-on research experience could make the difference between acceptance and rejection at top-tier medical schools. But if I'm hospitalized with diabetic ketoacidosis, if my health becomes unstable, if I have to take medical leave from school, that internship disappears along with everything else. Jessica is probably wondering why I haven't responded to her texts about the study group. We've been meeting every Sunday for the past semester, working through problem sets and reviewing lecture notes in the common room of our residence hall. She's been my closest friend since freshman year, the person who learned to recognize the signs of low blood sugar before I did, who keeps glucose tablets in her backpack just in case. How do I explain that I can't come back to campus because my own mother has decided insulin is poison? My father's conference in Chicago was supposed to be routine. 3 days of insurance adjuster training, networking with colleagues, the kind of business travel he's done dozens of times over the years. He left Friday morning with a casual kiss on my forehead, and a promise to bring back deep dish pizza from that place I love near Navy Pier. He has no idea that his wife has declared war on modern medicine in his absence, that his daughter is now counting hours until her blood sugar reaches dangerous levels. I try calling his cell phone, but it goes straight to voicemail. He mentioned having back-to-back seminars today, probably has his phone silenced in some conference room while his world implodes 40 miles away. Dad, it's Emma. I really need you to call me back as soon as you get this. It's about Mom and my medication. Please, it's urgent. The words feel inadequate, too small to contain the magnitude of what's happening. Linda is still organizing her arsenal of supplements, reading labels with the focused intensity she once reserved for medication calculations during her nursing shifts. Alpha-lipoic acid, 600 milligrams twice daily, she murmurs, making notes on a legal pad. Chromium picolinate, 200 micrograms with meals. Bitter melon extract, follow the manufacturer's dosing guidelines, but start with half strength to assess tolerance. The scientific terminology sounds almost legitimate coming from her, evidence of the nursing education that once made her an expert at medication management. She knows about drug interactions, bioavailability, dosing schedules. That knowledge makes her current behavior even more terrifying, because it's not born from ignorance. It's born from selective rejection of everything she once believed, cherry-picking information that supports her new worldview, while discarding decades of clinical experience. My Dexcom continuous glucose monitor is gone too, the small device that's been attached to my arm for the past 6 months, providing real-time blood sugar readings every minute. Without it, I'm flying blind, reduced to guessing about my glucose levels based on how I feel. The slight headache could be dehydration. The increased thirst might be anxiety, or my blood sugar could already be climbing past 200, heading toward the danger zone where ketones start forming. The meter she destroyed was my backup, a reliable old AccuCheck that I've used for years. Even if I had test strips, I'd need to drive to a pharmacy and buy a new meter, explain to some minimum wage cashier why I need to check my blood sugar immediately. The whole process would take at least an hour, time I can't afford to waste while my body slowly poisons itself. I've been corresponding with Dr. Gabriel Cousins, Linda says, pulling up a website on her laptop. He's a physician who's been reversing diabetes naturally for over 30 years. Look at these testimonials, Emma. Children who've been insulin-free for years after following his protocol. I recognize the name from diabetes forums, where his methods are regularly debunked by endocrinologists. Dr. Cousins primarily works with type 2 diabetes patients, where dietary changes and weight loss can sometimes reduce medication needs. But his marketing materials deliberately blur the distinction between type 1 and type 2, suggesting that all diabetes is reversible through lifestyle modifications. It's medical misinformation disguised as hope, targeting desperate patients and families looking for alternatives to lifelong medication management. Mom, Dr. Cousins doesn't work with type 1 diabetes patients, I try to explain. The testimonials you're seeing are from people with type 2, which is a completely different condition with different treatment options. Type 1 is autoimmune. My pancreas literally cannot produce insulin anymore. She turns the laptop screen toward me, pointing to a video testimonial from a young woman who claims she's been insulin-free for 3 years. Rachel was diagnosed with type 1 at age 16. She followed the Tree of Life protocol and now lives completely medication-free. Her A1C is normal. Her energy is incredible. She's studying to become a nutritionist to help other people heal. I want to ask about Rachel's C-peptide levels, the blood test that measures remaining pancreatic function in diabetes patients. I want to know if she was actually diagnosed with type 1, or if she was one of the many patients initially misdiagnosed due to age or presentation. I want to see her medical records, her antibody tests, her long-term follow-up data. But I know those questions will only reinforce my mother's belief that I've been brainwashed by conventional medicine. The irony is that I've researched these alternative approaches extensively, not because I believe they work, but because patients ask about them constantly. Part of becoming a good physician is understanding why people are drawn to these treatments, what emotional needs they fulfill that conventional medicine sometimes fails to address. The promise of a cure is always more appealing than the reality of chronic disease management, especially when that management requires daily injections and constant vigilance. My stomach is starting to hurt, a dull ache that could be hunger or stress, or the beginning of ketone formation. Without insulin, my body can't use glucose for energy, so it starts breaking down fat and protein instead. That process produces ketones, acids that can build up in the bloodstream and cause diabetic ketoacidosis. The early symptoms are subtle: nausea, abdominal pain, increased urination, excessive thirst. By the time you're vomiting and struggling to breathe, you're in serious trouble. I need to go back to campus, I say, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. I have that study group this afternoon, and I really need to prepare for Thursday's exam. We can continue this conversation later, maybe when Dad gets back from Chicago. Absolutely not. The firmness in her voice catches me off guard. You're not leaving this house until you're stabilized on the natural protocol. The first few days are critical for detoxification. Your body needs to clear out all the synthetic chemicals before it can begin healing properly. Detoxification. Another red flag term from the alternative medicine playbook. Insulin isn't a toxin that needs to be cleared from my system. It's a hormone my body desperately needs to survive. The detox period she's describing is actually the time it takes for dangerously high blood sugar to damage organs and potentially cause death. Mom, I'm an adult. You can't keep me here against my will. The words feel strange coming out of my mouth, like I'm talking to a stranger instead of the woman who taught me to drive and helped me with calculus homework, and celebrated every small victory in my diabetes management. I'm your mother, she responds, as if that settles the matter entirely. I'm responsible for your health and well-being, and I won't let you walk out that door to inject yourself with more poison. Not when I know there's a better way. The legal implications of her statement make my skin crawl. I'm 22 years old, legally an adult, capable of making my own medical decisions. But I'm also financially dependent on my parents for college tuition and living expenses. My car is registered in their names. My health insurance is through my father's employer. The power dynamics that seemed insignificant yesterday have suddenly become chains holding me in place. My phone rings, and for a moment, hope surges through me. Maybe it's Dad calling back, ready to talk sense into his wife. But the caller ID shows Jessica's name, and I realize I have to make a choice. Answer the call, and potentially alert my roommate that something's wrong, or let it go to voicemail, and maintain the facade that everything's normal. Don't answer that, Linda says before I can decide. You need to focus on beginning your healing journey, not on outside distractions. I decline the call, but immediately regret it. Jessica knows my habits, knows I always answer her calls, unless something's seriously wrong. She'll probably try calling again, maybe even drive over here, if she can't reach me. The thought of involving my friends in this nightmare makes me feel sick, but it might be my only option for getting help. The supplement bottles are arranged on the counter now, like a makeshift pharmacy, each one labeled with careful instructions about timing and dosage. Cinnamon bark extract to be taken with meals. Gymnema sylvester on an empty stomach. Alpha-lipoic acid twice daily with food. It looks scientific and official, a treatment protocol that could easily fool someone without medical training. I've calculated everything based on your body weight and current insulin dosage. Linda explains, consulting her notes. We'll start with conservative doses and adjust upward as needed. The goal is to gradually restore your pancreatic function while supporting your body's natural glucose regulation systems. The fantasy she's constructed is elaborate and detailed, complete with medical terminology and dosing schedules. In her mind, this isn't neglect or abuse. It's a carefully planned intervention based on research and clinical protocols she's found online. The fact that those protocols have never been validated in type 1 diabetes patients, never been published in peer-reviewed journals, never been approved by any medical regulatory body, doesn't matter to her anymore. I think about my endocrinologist Dr. Martinez, who I'm supposed to see next month for my quarterly appointment. He's been managing my diabetes since I started college, adjusting my insulin regimen as my needs changed with stress and schedule variations. What will I tell him when he asks about my glucose logs and medication adherence? How do I explain that my mother decided his medical expertise was worthless compared to testimonials from alternative medicine websites? The morning is slipping away, precious time lost while my blood sugar climbs steadily higher. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday evening, afraid to consume carbohydrates without insulin to process them. But fasting for too long can trigger ketone production even in healthy people, and my situation is far from healthy. I'm trapped between the need to eat and the impossibility of safely
Processing food without medication. Let's start with breakfast, Linda suggests, opening the refrigerator to reveal a collection of vegetables and supplements I don't recognize. I've prepared a special protocol meal designed to support stable blood sugar levels. Raw vegetables with high fiber content, plant-based proteins, minimal glycemic impact. The meal she's describing might be appropriate for someone trying to prevent type 2 diabetes or manage mild insulin resistance. For someone with type 1 diabetes who hasn't had insulin in hours, it's still dangerous. Any carbohydrates, no matter how complex or fiber-rich, will raise my blood sugar when my body has no way to process them effectively. I'm not hungry, I lie, hoping to avoid the conversation about why I can't eat anything without medication. That's the insulin talking, she responds immediately. Synthetic hormones disrupt natural hunger and satiety signals. As your body detoxes, your appetite will normalize and you'll start craving the foods your body actually needs for healing. Every explanation I offer gets twisted into evidence of pharmaceutical manipulation. Every symptom becomes proof that my body is addicted to medications. The logical framework she's constructed is immune to contradiction because any evidence against it gets reinterpreted as evidence for it. It's the perfect closed loop of conspiracy thinking. My phone buzzes with a text from Jessica. Everything okay? You missed the study group sign-up deadline and your phone went straight to voicemail. Want me to come over? The concern in her message is obvious even through the abbreviated text format. She knows something's wrong, and she's offering help without even knowing what kind of help I might need. Who's texting you? Linda asks, moving closer to read over my shoulder. Just Jessica wondering about the study group. Tell her you're taking a few days off from school to focus on your health. Tell her you'll be in touch later this week. The script she's providing sounds reasonable on the surface, the kind of message that would buy time without raising immediate alarm. But Jessica knows I've never missed a study group voluntarily. Knows that my pre-med track doesn't allow for casual days off, especially with exams coming up. Any message suggesting I'm taking time away from academics will set off every alarm bell in her head. She'll probably drive over here immediately, and then I'll have to explain why my mother has lost her mind and why I'm trapped in my childhood home watching my blood sugar climb toward dangerous levels. I should probably call her, I suggest, trying to sound casual. She's been helping me with organic chemistry, and I don't want her to think I'm abandoning our study partnership. No phone calls, Linda says firmly. No outside contact until you're stabilized on the natural protocol. I need you to trust the process, Emma. Trust me to guide you through this transition. The isolation she's demanding terrifies me more than the missing medication.
Cutting off contact with friends, preventing communication with my father, controlling access to outside medical help. These are the tactics of abuse disguised as protection, the kind of behavior I've read about in psychology textbooks but never imagined experiencing in my own family. I realize now that this confrontation was planned. She waited until Dad was out of town, until I was home for the weekend without my usual support systems. She probably researched the conference schedule to make sure he'd be unavailable for the critical first day of her intervention. This wasn't an impulsive decision born from sudden inspiration. This was a calculated move designed to maximize her control and minimize my options for getting help. The supplements stare back at me from the counter, their labels promising miracles I know they can't deliver. In a few hours, when my blood sugar reaches truly dangerous levels, when I start vomiting and struggling to think clearly, these bottles will sit here like silent witnesses to my mother's betrayal. Like evidence of the moment love became indistinguishable from attempted murder. Part 3. The journey of doubt. Hours crawl by with excruciating slowness, each minute marked by subtle changes in how my body feels. The headache is definitely real now, a persistent throb behind my eyes that intensifies when I move too quickly. My mouth feels cotton dry, despite drinking water constantly, and I've been to the bathroom 4 times in the past hour. These are the early warning signs every diabetic learns to recognize, the body's distress signals when blood sugar begins its dangerous climb. Linda has settled into her role as my new medical supervisor with frightening efficiency. She's created a schedule for supplement administration, timing everything around meals she's preparing according to some protocol she found online. The kitchen table is covered with printouts from various alternative medicine websites, testimonials highlighted in yellow marker, dosing charts written in her careful nursing script. Your grandfather had diabetes, she mentions casually while organizing pills into a weekly medication organizer, the same kind she once used for my actual prescriptions. This was back in the 1960s, before all these modern insulins were available. He managed it naturally for years, lived to be 83. I want to point out that my grandfather had type 2 diabetes, diagnosed in his 60s when his pancreas was still producing some insulin. I want to explain that the natural management of that era often meant early death from complications that are now preventable with proper treatment. But every correction I attempt gets dismissed as pharmaceutical propaganda. Every fact I cite becomes evidence of my indoctrination. The doubt creeping into my mind isn't about the science. I know insulin works because I've been using it successfully for 8 years. I know type 1 diabetes is autoimmune because I've seen the antibody test results, understand the pathophysiology from my pre-med coursework. But I'm starting to doubt my own perception of what's happening here, my ability to distinguish between normal family concern and something much darker. This is the woman who taught me to check my blood sugar, who stayed awake with me during middle-of-the-night low glucose episodes, who advocated fiercely with insurance companies to get me the best available technology. She drove me to endocrinology appointments and took detailed notes about carbohydrate ratios and correction factors. She learned to give glucagon injections in case of emergencies and kept glucose tablets in every room of the house. How does someone go from being the perfect diabetes parent to believing that diabetes isn't real? How does a trained nurse decide that testimonials from strangers on the internet are more reliable than peer-reviewed medical research? The cognitive dissonance required for such a complete reversal suggests either deliberate self-deception or something approaching mental illness. My phone keeps buzzing with messages I'm not allowed to answer. Jessica has moved from casual concern to obvious worry, sending increasingly urgent texts about missing study group and asking if I need anything. My chemistry lab partner wants to know if I'm planning to attend tomorrow's session. A professor has sent a reminder about office hours I'd scheduled for this afternoon. Normal life continuing while mine spirals into surreal medical emergency. People are starting to worry about me, I mention, hoping to appeal to her maternal instincts. Maybe I should just send a quick message letting them know I'm okay. You're not okay, she responds bluntly. You've been poisoning yourself with synthetic chemicals for years. Your friends and professors are part of the system that's been keeping you sick. Once you begin healing naturally, you'll see how many of these relationships were built around your disease, rather than genuine care for your well-being. The paranoia in her statement is breathtaking. She's not just rejecting medical treatment, she's rejecting every relationship and institution that supported my previous healthcare decisions. My friends who learned to recognize hypoglycemia symptoms are now part of a conspiracy. My professors who accommodated my medical needs are pharmaceutical enablers. My doctors who've kept me healthy for years are profiteering criminals. I think about Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, who I started seeing 2 years ago when my anxiety about diabetes management began interfering with my academic performance. She helped me understand that feeling anxious about a chronic medical condition is normal, that developing healthy coping strategies doesn't mean accepting defeat. The medication she prescribed has made it possible for me to sleep through the night without checking my blood sugar compulsively, to trust my continuous glucose monitor instead of testing every hour. In my mother's new worldview, Dr. Rodriguez is another predator keeping me dependent on unnecessary chemicals. The anxiety medication that improved my quality of life dramatically is just another toxin that needs to be eliminated. The progress I've made in therapy, the confidence I've gained in managing my condition independently, all of it becomes evidence of pharmaceutical manipulation, rather than genuine healing. I'm scared, I admit, hoping honesty might break through her delusions. I'm scared of what happens if my blood sugar gets too high. I'm scared of diabetic ketoacidosis. I'm scared of dying because you won't let me take the medication that's kept me alive for 8 years. For a moment her expression softens, and I see a glimpse of the mother I remember. The one who held me when I cried after my diagnosis, who promised we'd figure out how to manage this together. But then her jaw sets again, with that familiar stubborn determination. The fear is part of the programming, she says gently, as if explaining something to a child. They've conditioned you to believe you'll die without their products, but people lived with diabetes for thousands of years before insulin was invented. Your body knows how to heal itself if you give it the chance. The historical ignorance of her statement is staggering. People with type 1 diabetes did indeed live before insulin was discovered in 1921, but they lived briefly and miserably before dying from diabetic ketoacidosis. The life expectancy for a type 1 diabetic child in 1920 was measured in months, not years. Insulin didn't create dependence, it created survival. But pointing out these facts will only reinforce her belief that I've been brainwashed by medical school propaganda. In her mind, any information that contradicts her new beliefs must be pharmaceutical misinformation, regardless of its source or historical verification. She's created an intellectual framework where evidence against her position becomes evidence for it, making rational discussion impossible. The afternoon sun slants through our kitchen windows, highlighting dust motes that dance in the air like tiny reminders of normal Sunday afternoons. This should have been a routine weekend visit, maybe helping with grocery shopping or watching a movie together, before driving back to campus for another week of classes. Instead, I'm essentially being held hostage by someone who believes love justifies medical abuse. My father still hasn't called back, probably enjoying dinner at some conference hotel while his daughter faces a medical emergency he doesn't even know about. Part of me resents his absence, his tendency to avoid conflict by simply not being present when difficult conversations need to happen. But another part of me is grateful he's not here to witness his wife's transformation into someone unrecognizable. The supplements are having no noticeable effect on how I feel, which isn't surprising since they're designed for entirely different metabolic conditions. The cinnamon extract might provide modest benefits for someone with mild insulin resistance, but it can't replace the hormone my pancreas stopped producing years ago. The chromium picolinate might help with glucose metabolism in healthy individuals, but it's useless when there's no insulin available to facilitate glucose uptake by cells. How long do you think it will take? I ask, trying to sound genuinely curious rather than desperately worried. For the natural protocol to start working, I mean. Linda consults her printed materials with the focused attention she once gave to medical charts during her nursing career. According to Dr. Cosens, most patients begin seeing improvements within 72 hours. Blood sugar stabilization, increased energy, reduced cravings for processed foods. Some people notice changes even sooner, especially younger patients whose bodies haven't been damaged by long-term pharmaceutical use. 72 hours. She expects me to survive 3 days without insulin, while my blood sugar climbs steadily higher and my body begins producing ketones. She has no idea that diabetic ketoacidosis can develop within hours, not days, or that delayed treatment can result in permanent organ damage or death. Her timeline is based on alternative medicine testimonials rather than medical reality. I'm calculating time zones in my head, trying to figure out when my father's conference sessions might end and when he might check his phone. Chicago is an hour behind Milwaukee, so his afternoon meetings probably won't wrap up until 6 or 7 our time. Even if he calls back immediately, it could be evening before he understands the gravity of what's happening here. Jessica sends another text, this one more direct. Emma, I'm really worried about you. Your phone keeps going to voicemail and you're not responding to messages. I'm thinking about driving over to check on you. Please let me know you're okay. The concern in her words makes my throat tight with emotion. Someone outside this house still cares about my well-being, still recognizes that my sudden silence isn't normal. Let me just text her back, I plead. Something simple, just to let her know I'm alive. She's going to call the police if she doesn't hear from me soon. What would you tell her? Linda asks, studying my face carefully. That your mother is trying to heal you naturally. That you're taking a break from pharmaceutical dependence. Do you think she'd support your healing journey, or do you think she'd try to sabotage it? The loaded question reveals how completely she's reframed this situation in her mind. Anyone who opposes her medical intervention becomes an enemy of my health rather than someone concerned about my safety. Friends who might call for help become saboteurs. Medical professionals who might provide treatment become criminals. She's created a narrative where resistance to her plan is proof of malicious intent rather than legitimate concern. My vision is starting to feel slightly blurry, another early sign of hyperglycemia that sends ice through my veins. Without my continuous glucose monitor, I can't quantify exactly how high my blood sugar has climbed, but my body is providing increasingly urgent warnings that something is seriously wrong. The thirst is becoming constant now, accompanied by a strange metallic taste that often precedes ketone formation. I need to use the bathroom, I say, hoping for a few minutes of privacy to assess my situation and maybe send a quick message for help. Of course, Linda smiles, but I notice she's positioned herself where she can monitor the hallway. The detoxification process often increases urination frequency as your body eliminates accumulated toxins. Even my need to urinate frequently gets reinterpreted as evidence of pharmaceutical detox rather than dangerous glucose elevation. Every symptom of deteriorating health becomes proof that her protocol is working, that my body is healing itself by rejecting modern medicine. The delusion is so complete that my obvious decline will only reinforce her conviction that she's saving my life. In the bathroom, I splash cold water on my face and stare at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes look slightly glassy, my skin seems flushed despite feeling cold. These are subtle changes that my mother might not notice immediately, but they're visible to someone who's been monitoring their own diabetes symptoms for years. I'm running out of time before this becomes a genuine medical emergency. I pull out my phone and quickly type a message to Jessica. Something wrong with mom, can't leave house. Need help but don't call police yet. Will explain later. It's cryptic enough to avoid triggering immediate panic, but clear enough to convey that I'm in trouble. I hit send and immediately delete the message from my outgoing texts, hoping my mother won't think to check my phone usage. Within seconds, Jessica responds. On my way. What kind of help do you need? But before I can reply, I hear footsteps in the hallway and quickly shove my phone back in my pocket. The opportunity for communication is gone, but at least someone outside this house now knows something is seriously wrong. Walking back to the kitchen feels like moving through thick syrup, my coordination slightly off in a way that makes me grip the wall for support. The neurological symptoms of hyperglycemia are beginning, the subtle changes in cognitive function that precede more serious complications. I'm entering dangerous territory now, moving from uncomfortable symptoms toward genuine medical crisis. Linda is reading testimonials on her laptop when I return, her face glowing with the fervor of someone who's found absolute truth in a world of deception. Listen to this one, she says excitedly. A 12-year-old boy in Oregon, insulin-free for 18 months after following a raw food protocol. His parents were told he'd need injections for life, but they chose natural healing instead. Now he's completely healthy, no medications, no blood sugar monitoring, no dietary restrictions. The story she's reading sounds exactly like the kind of dangerous misinformation that leads to hospitalized children and grief-stricken parents. But in her current state of mind, these testimonials represent hope rather than warnings. She's selecting information that confirms her beliefs while ignoring the countless studies and clinical experiences that contradict them.
Time is becoming my enemy now, each passing hour, moving me closer to a medical emergency that could have permanent consequences. My mother sits across from me reading about miracle cures, while my pancreas continues its silent strike, refusing to produce the hormone keeping me alive. Soon the choice between natural healing and pharmaceutical intervention will be made for us both by paramedics and emergency room physicians. But for now I can only wait and hope that Jessica understands my message, that my father checks his voicemail, that someone outside this house recognizes the urgency of what's happening before it's too late. The supplements stare back at me from the counter like false promises, powerless to prevent the crisis building inside my body one elevated glucose molecule at a time. Part 4. The First Red Flag. By late afternoon, the symptoms are becoming impossible to ignore. My head pounds with each heartbeat, a relentless percussion that makes focusing on conversation increasingly difficult. The constant thirst has evolved into something desperate, my mouth feeling parched no matter how much water I consume. Most concerning is the slight nausea beginning to gnaw at my stomach, a warning sign that ketones might be forming as my body searches for alternative fuel sources. Linda remains obliviously optimistic, interpreting every symptom as evidence of successful detoxification. When I mention feeling tired, she nods knowingly and explains how pharmaceutical withdrawal often causes initial fatigue before energy levels improve dramatically. When I complain about the headache, she offers herbal tea and explains how synthetic hormones can cause rebound pain as they clear from my system. "Your body is working so hard right now," she says with genuine warmth, placing a cool hand on my forehead in a gesture that feels familiar and terrifying simultaneously. "All those years of chemical interference, and finally your natural healing systems can function properly. The discomfort you're feeling is temporary, sweetheart. In a few days you'll have more energy than you've had in years." The thermometer reads 99.2 degrees, a low-grade fever that could indicate the beginning of diabetic ketoacidosis, or simply stress and dehydration. Without proper blood sugar monitoring, I can't distinguish between early DKA and other possible explanations for how terrible I feel. The ambiguity is almost worse than knowing for certain, leaving me to guess whether I have hours or days before this becomes life-threatening. My phone buzzes with an incoming call from Jessica, and Linda immediately moves to intercept it. "No outside contact," she reminds me firmly. "Not until you're stabilized on the natural protocol." The phone continues ringing, Jessica's name bright on the screen, like a lifeline I'm not allowed to grasp. Eventually it goes to voicemail, leaving me wondering what message she might leave and whether my mother will think to check. "She's persistent," Linda observes, watching the missed call notification appear. That's often a sign of codependent relationships built around illness rather than genuine friendship. Once you're healthy, you'll probably find that many of these connections were actually unhealthy dependencies disguised as support. The casual dismissal of my closest friendship sends rage coursing through me, temporarily overpowering the physical discomfort. Jessica has been nothing but supportive of my diabetes management, learning to recognize symptoms and helping me maintain normal social activities despite the constant medical considerations. To suggest that her concern represents codependency rather than genuine care is not just wrong, it's cruel. "Jessica cares about me as a person," I protest, struggling to keep my voice level. "She's not interested in my diabetes, except as something that affects my health and happiness. She's my friend, because of who I am, not because of my medical condition." "That's what people in enabling relationships always believe," Linda responds with infuriating patience. "But think about how much of your identity has been built around being diabetic. How many conversations center on blood sugar levels and insulin dosages and dietary considerations? When you're truly healthy, when you no longer need constant medical management, you'll discover which relationships were authentic and which were based on your role as a patient." The psychological manipulation in her argument is sophisticated, designed to isolate me from support systems by questioning the motives of people who care about my well-being. By suggesting that concern about my health indicates unhealthy codependency, she's attempting to reframe any outside intervention as harmful rather than helpful. It's a classic tactic of abuse, convincing the victim that their support network represents danger rather than safety. Dad's phone is still going straight to voicemail, his conference apparently running later than expected. I've left 3 messages now, each one more urgent than the last, but his absence feels increasingly deliberate. Some rational part of my mind knows he's simply focused on work obligations and has no idea what's happening at home. But emotional desperation is making me paranoid, wondering if this timing is somehow coordinated, if both parents have conspired to ensure I have no advocates during this critical period. The evening news begins playing in the background. Normal Sunday programming about weather forecasts and sports scores that feels surreal given my current circumstances. The anchor's cheerful voice, discussing tomorrow's temperature range, seems to come from another universe, one where mothers don't destroy their children's medication based on conspiracy theories found online. We should probably think about dinner, Linda suggests, consulting her notebook of natural healing protocols. Something light and alkalizing to support your body's detoxification process. Raw vegetables, maybe some quinoa, definitely no processed sugars or refined carbohydrates that might interfere with your pancreatic recovery. The mention of food makes my stomach clench with anxiety. Eating anything with carbohydrates while my blood sugar is already elevated could push me over the edge into serious medical emergency. But refusing to eat will only reinforce her belief that pharmaceutical dependence has disrupted my natural hunger signals. I'm trapped between equally dangerous options, unable to safely consume food, or safely continue fasting. I'm not really hungry, I hedge, hoping to delay the decision about eating without insulin coverage. Loss of appetite is completely normal during detox, she assures me. Your body is finally free to focus on healing instead of processing synthetic chemicals. But you need some nutrition to support the recovery process, even if you don't feel like eating. Her nursing background makes her observations sound medical and authoritative, even when they're completely wrong. She's applying legitimate knowledge about general health and nutrition to a specific medical emergency she doesn't understand, creating dangerous recommendations based on partial information and wishful thinking. A car door slams in our driveway, and hope surges through me until I realize it's just our neighbor Mr. Patterson coming home from weekend errands. The false alarm makes me realize how desperately I'm hoping for rescue, how completely I've accepted that I can't resolve this situation through reason or negotiation with my mother. Someone else needs to intervene, but the people who might help don't know I need help yet. Jessica sends a text message that my mother immediately notices. Emma, I'm really worried. I drove by your house but didn't want to ring the doorbell. If you're dealing with family stuff, can you just send me a quick message letting me know you're okay? I'll be at the library until 10 if you need anything. She drove by our house. Linda's voice carries a note of alarm I haven't heard before. That's stalking behavior, Emma. Healthy friendships don't involve surveillance when someone doesn't respond to contact attempts immediately. Part 5. The false explanation. The phone rings at exactly 7:30, cutting through the tense silence that settled over our kitchen like fog. Dad's name appears on the caller ID, and I lunge for the device before Linda can intercept it. My hands shake as I swipe to answer, relief flooding through me at the sound of his familiar voice. Emma, sweetheart, I got your messages. What's this about your mother and medication? You sounded really upset. His tone carries the casual concern of someone who assumes this is a minor disagreement rather than a medical emergency, probably expecting to mediate some argument about insurance co-payments or prescription timing. I glance at Linda, who's moved closer to monitor our conversation, her expression carefully neutral but her posture radiating tension. Dad, Mom threw away all my insulin this morning. She destroyed my blood sugar monitor, my rescue inhaler, everything. She thinks she can cure my diabetes with supplements and won't let me leave the house to get my prescriptions refilled. Silence stretches across the line for several heartbeats, long enough that I wonder if the call dropped. Then Dad's voice returns, quieter now, more cautious. Let me talk to your mother, Emma. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding hits like a slap across the face. This isn't
confusion about medication schedules or disagreement about treatment approaches. This is deliberate destruction of life-sustaining medication by someone who's lost touch with medical reality. But Dad's instinct is to minimize conflict, to find middle ground where none exists, to treat serious problems as communication failures that can be resolved through patient discussion. Linda takes the phone from my trembling hands with practiced ease, her voice shifting into the warm, reasonable tone she uses for difficult conversations. Michael, I know this seems sudden, but I've been researching Emma's condition extensively. I found compelling evidence that type 1 diabetes can be reversed through natural healing protocols. Children all over the world are living insulin-free after following specific dietary and supplement regimens. I can't hear Dad's response, but Linda's expression suggests he's expressing skepticism about her claims. Her jaw tightens slightly, and when she speaks again, her voice carries a note of hurt disappointment. I thought you'd be more supportive of our daughter's healing journey. I thought you'd want her to be truly healthy instead of dependent on pharmaceutical companies for the rest of her life. The manipulation is subtle but effective, reframing medical treatment as corporate exploitation and positioning herself as the only parent truly concerned about my well-being. Any opposition to her plan becomes evidence of insufficient love or pharmaceutical brainwashing rather than legitimate medical concern. She's been without insulin for 9 hours now. Linda continues, consulting her watch with satisfaction rather than alarm. Her body is already beginning the detoxification process. Introducing synthetic hormones at this point could interfere with her natural healing mechanisms. 9 hours, the number feels both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. Long enough for my blood sugar to reach dangerous levels, short enough that permanent damage might still be preventable if I could access proper medical treatment immediately. But Linda speaks about the time elapsed like it's a positive milestone rather than mounting evidence of medical crisis. Dad's voice becomes slightly louder, audible even though the phone isn't on speaker. His tone suggests growing alarm as he begins to understand the seriousness of what's happening. Linda's responses become more defensive, her explanations more elaborate and less convincing. The conventional medical establishment has a vested interest in keeping patients dependent on expensive treatments, she argues, pulling up websites on her laptop to support her position. Independent research shows that autoimmune conditions like diabetes can be reversed through elimination of inflammatory foods and restoration of gut microbiome balance. The scientific terminology sounds legitimate coming from someone with nursing credentials, but it's being applied to entirely wrong medical situations. Gut health and inflammatory foods might play roles in type 2 diabetes prevention, but they're irrelevant to the autoimmune destruction of pancreatic beta cells that characterizes type 1 diabetes. She's mixing legitimate nutritional science with dangerous medical misinformation. I'm not asking you to believe me immediately, Linda says, her voice taking on the patient tone she might use with a confused patient. I'm asking you to trust me enough to let Emma try this natural approach for 72 hours. If she doesn't show significant improvement by Wednesday, we can discuss reintroducing pharmaceutical interventions. 72 hours, 3 days without insulin while my blood sugar climbs steadily higher and my body begins producing ketones that could lead to coma and death. She's negotiating for time as if diabetes were a chronic condition that responds slowly to treatment changes rather than an acute medical emergency that can become fatal within hours. Dad's voice becomes more insistent, though I still can't make out specific words. Linda's responses grow shorter and more clipped, her patience clearly wearing thin as she encounters unexpected resistance to her plan. She probably assumed he'd support her position once she explained her research, expected him to recognize her superior medical knowledge and defer to her nursing expertise. Fine, she says suddenly, her tone shifting to cold formality. If you want to drive back tonight to force our daughter to inject herself with synthetic chemicals, that's your choice. But don't expect me to enable pharmaceutical dependence just because you're uncomfortable with natural healing approaches. The ultimatum is delivered with surgical precision, designed to make Dad feel guilty for opposing her intervention rather than grateful that someone is trying to help their daughter. She's transformed his concern about my medical safety into evidence of his insufficient commitment to my health, making reasonable parenting behavior seem selfish and misguided. Linda hands me the phone back with obvious reluctance, her expression suggesting she's disappointed by his reaction but not entirely surprised. Your father wants to talk to you again, she says, stepping back just far enough to monitor our conversation without appearing to eavesdrop obviously. Emma, listen to me carefully. Dad's voice carries an urgency I haven't heard before. I'm leaving Chicago right now. I should be home by 10:30 at the latest. Do not eat anything until I get there. And if you start feeling worse, if you start vomiting or having trouble breathing, you call 911 immediately. Do you understand me? The instructions feel like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in medical uncertainty. He understands the gravity of what's happening, recognizes that this isn't a philosophical disagreement about treatment approaches but a genuine medical emergency, requiring immediate intervention. Someone outside this house finally grasps the danger I'm facing. I understand, I whisper, acutely aware of my mother's presence and hoping she can't hear Dad's specific words. Drive safely, okay? I'll be fine until you get here. The lie tastes bitter on my tongue, but reassuring him seems important when he's about to drive 3 hours through evening traffic while worried about his daughter's safety. The last thing I need is for him to have an accident rushing home to deal with his wife's medical delusions. Linda reclaims the phone before I can say anything else, her voice returning to that artificially warm tone she uses when she wants something. Michael, I hope you'll keep an open mind about this. I know it seems radical, but Emma's health is too important for us to blindly follow conventional protocols without exploring alternatives. She disconnects the call before he can respond, setting the phone aside with an air of finality that suggests the conversation is over, regardless of his concerns. Your father doesn't understand, she says with obvious disappointment. He's not medically trained, so he defaults to whatever doctors tell him without questioning their motives or financial incentives. The irony of her statement is breathtaking. Dad's lack of medical training makes him more likely to trust established medicine rather than less, more inclined to defer to expert opinion rather than substitute his own judgment for professional knowledge. His skepticism about her natural healing claims represents appropriate caution rather than pharmaceutical brainwashing. Maybe we should compromise, I suggest desperately. Maybe I could take a smaller insulin dose, just enough to prevent ketoacidosis, while also trying some of the supplements you've researched. That way we could explore natural approaches without risking serious medical complications. For a moment hope flickers in her eyes as she considers the possibility of finding middle ground. Then her expression hardens again with that familiar stubborn determination. That's exactly how pharmaceutical companies maintain their control, she responds. They convince people to reduce medications gradually while adding natural supplements, but the chemical dependence continues. You have to choose complete healing or continued pharmaceutical slavery. There's no middle path. The false dichotomy she's presenting reveals how completely she's embraced all-or-nothing thinking about medical treatment. Any compromise becomes evidence of insufficient commitment to natural healing. Any gradual approach becomes proof of pharmaceutical manipulation. She's created a framework where moderation represents failure rather than wisdom. My vision is becoming noticeably blurry now, words on her laptop screen requiring extra focus to read clearly. The neurological symptoms of severe hyperglycemia are beginning, subtle changes in cognitive function that precede more serious complications. I'm moving from uncomfortable symptoms toward genuine medical crisis, but Linda interprets my obvious decline as progress toward pharmaceutical-free health. You're looking better already, she observes with satisfaction, apparently mistaking my glazed expression for peaceful calm rather than metabolic distress. Your skin has more color, your breathing seems deeper and more relaxed. The detoxification process is working exactly as the protocols predicted. The delusion is so complete that deteriorating health becomes evidence of improving health, dangerous symptoms become signs of successful treatment. Every indicator of medical emergency gets reinterpreted through the lens of natural healing theory, making rational assessment of my condition impossible within her current belief system. Jessica sends another text message, this one more direct. Emma, I know something's wrong. Your mom's car is in the driveway but no lights are on upstairs, and you haven't responded to any messages for hours. I'm going to call your dad if I don't hear from you in the next 30 minutes. The concern in her words is obvious, and her threat to escalate by contacting my father shows she understands this isn't normal behavior. She's threatening to call your father now, Linda says, reading over my shoulder with obvious disapproval. This is exactly the kind of boundary violation I've been warning you about. Healthy relationships respect when someone needs space to focus on their health. The boundary violation she's describing is actually appropriate concern about a friend's sudden disappearance, the kind of escalation any reasonable person would pursue when someone stops responding to communication without explanation. But in Linda's reframed reality, Jessica's worried persistence becomes evidence of unhealthy attachment rather than genuine friendship. Maybe I should just send her a quick message, I suggest, hoping to prevent my friend from involving additional people in this situation. Something simple to let her know I'm okay and will be in touch tomorrow. What would you tell her? Linda asks, studying my face carefully. Would you mention the natural healing protocol we've started? Would you explain that you're taking a break from pharmaceutical dependence? Or would you send some neutral message that avoids the real issues? The loaded question reveals her expectation that any communication with outside parties should promote her medical intervention rather than simply reassure them about my safety. She wants me to become an advocate for her natural healing approach, spreading her message to friends and family rather than simply maintaining normal relationships during a difficult time. I'd probably just say I'm dealing with some family health stuff and will be back in touch soon. I respond honestly. Nothing dramatic, just enough information to stop her from worrying unnecessarily. Family health stuff, Linda repeats with obvious disappointment. As if healing naturally is something to be ashamed of rather than celebrated. As if choosing wellness over pharmaceutical dependence is a family problem rather than a family triumph. Her interpretation of my proposed message reveals how completely she's reframed this situation as a positive development rather than a medical emergency. In her mind, my healing journey deserves celebration and publicity rather than privacy and caution. Any attempt to minimize or downplay what's happening becomes evidence of internalized shame about natural health approaches. The kitchen feels smaller as evening settles over our house, shadows lengthening across familiar spaces that now feel foreign and threatening. This room, where I learned to count carbohydrates and calculate insulin doses, has become the site of my mother's attempt to eliminate those skills entirely. The table where we used to review my glucose logs together now holds supplements that can't replace the medication she destroyed. Your energy is already improving, Linda observes, apparently mistaking my growing anxiety for increased alertness. Natural healing often produces rapid improvements once pharmaceutical interference is eliminated. Some people notice changes within hours rather than days. The improvements she's describing exist only in her imagination, projections of hope rather than observations of reality. My energy isn't increasing. I'm becoming increasingly agitated as my blood sugar climbs and my body responds to metabolic stress. But her need to see progress colors her perception of everything, making deterioration invisible when it contradicts her expectations. Dad is driving through Illinois darkness right now, probably pushing speed limits and fighting Sunday evening traffic around Chicago. His conference materials scattered across the passenger seat, his mind focused entirely on getting home to deal with his wife's medical intervention and his daughter's safety. The image of him gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles while navigating unfamiliar highways makes my chest tight with guilt and gratitude. Time moves differently during medical emergencies, minutes feeling like hours while hours pass like minutes. The clock on our microwave shows 8:47, which means Dad won't arrive for at least another hour and 45 minutes. Jessica's 30-minute deadline for calling him has already passed, though she might extend it if she's trying to avoid creating family drama unnecessarily. We should prepare for some resistance, Linda mentions casually, organizing her supplement bottles with practiced efficiency. People often react negatively when someone chooses natural healing over conventional medicine. They've been conditioned to fear anything that challenges pharmaceutical authority. The resistance she's anticipating isn't philosophical opposition to alternative medicine. It's appropriate medical concern about a diabetic patient going without insulin for an extended period. But she's already reframed any intervention as evidence of programming rather than legitimate worry about my health and safety. My phone rings again, this time showing my father's number. Linda moves to intercept the call, but I'm faster this time, swiping to answer before she can stop me. Dad, Emma, how are you feeling right now? Are you having any nausea, any trouble breathing, any abdominal pain? His questions are specific and urgent, someone who's been researching diabetic ketoacidosis symptoms during his drive home. I have a headache and I'm really thirsty. I respond honestly, aware that Linda is listening to every word. My vision seems a little blurry, but I'm not vomiting or having trouble breathing yet. Yet he repeats grimly, Emma, I need you to listen carefully. If any of those symptoms develop, if you start feeling nauseous or short of breath, you call 911 immediately. Don't wait for me to get home, don't ask your mother's permission, just call for help. Promise me. The desperation in his voice cuts through the fog of confusion and fear that's been building all day. Someone understands the danger I'm facing. Someone recognizes that this isn't a philosophical disagreement about treatment approaches, but a medical emergency that could have permanent consequences if not addressed quickly. I promise, I whisper, hoping my mother can't hear the specific words, but knowing she can certainly hear the tone of our conversation. Linda takes the phone away again before I can say anything else, her patience with outside interference clearly exhausted. Michael, I understand you're concerned, but your daughter is beginning a healing journey that requires trust and patience. Constantly monitoring her symptoms and threatening medical intervention will only increase her anxiety and interfere with her body's natural recovery processes. She disconnects the call without waiting for his response, turning off the phone entirely to prevent further communication. The action feels like severing my last connection to the outside world, isolating me completely within her medical delusion, until Dad can physically arrive to provide intervention. He means well, she says, with obvious disappointment, but his fear is preventing him from seeing the bigger picture. Sometimes the people who love us most have the hardest time accepting that there might be better approaches than the ones they're familiar with. The bigger picture she's describing involves risking my life to prove a point about natural healing, gambling with diabetic ketoacidosis to demonstrate that supplements can replace insulin therapy.
Her reframing of his medical concern as fear-based resistance reveals how completely she's lost perspective on the situation's actual stakes. Night is falling over Wauwatosa, streetlights beginning to flicker on outside our kitchen windows. In normal circumstances, this would be the time when I'd be driving back to campus, preparing for tomorrow's classes and checking my blood sugar one final time before bed. Instead, I'm trapped in my childhood home watching my blood sugar climb toward dangerous levels while my mother celebrates my pharmaceutical-free evening as a victory for natural healing. The supplements sit on our counter like silent witnesses to her delusion, powerless to prevent the crisis building inside my body one elevated glucose molecule at a time. Soon the choice between natural healing and medical intervention will be made for both of us by paramedics and emergency room physicians who won't be swayed by testimonials or conspiracy theories about pharmaceutical companies. But for now, I can only wait and hope that Dad arrives before my symptoms progress beyond the point where rational conversation remains possible, before the biochemical crisis in my bloodstream overwhelms my body's ability to compensate for missing insulin. The clock shows 9:15, and every minute feels like a step closer to the edge of a cliff I never chose to approach. Part 6. The reveal setup. The front door slams shut with enough force to rattle the windows, and Dad's voice carries through the house like thunder. "Linda, where are you?" His footsteps pound across the hardwood floors, moving with purpose and barely contained fury. It's 10:15 p.m., which means he made the drive from Chicago in record time, probably breaking every speed limit between here and the Illinois border. Linda straightens in her chair, smoothing her blouse as if preparing for a business meeting, rather than confronting her husband about their daughter's medical emergency. "We're in the kitchen, Michael. Emma's doing wonderfully on her first day of natural healing." He appears in the doorway looking disheveled and wild-eyed, his conference badge still clipped to his wrinkled shirt, his usually perfect hair mussed from running his hands through it during the drive. His gaze immediately finds me sitting at the table, and I watch his face cycle through relief, alarm, and rage as he takes in my appearance. "Jesus Christ, Emma, you look terrible." His voice cracks with emotion as he rushes to my side, placing a hand on my forehead to check for fever. "Your skin is flushed, your eyes look glassy. How long have you been feeling like this?" The direct question forces me to confront how much my condition has deteriorated over the past 13 hours. My headache has evolved into a pounding skull crusher that makes it difficult to focus on conversation. The thirst has become overwhelming, my mouth feeling like cotton despite drinking water constantly. Most alarming is the nausea that's been building steadily, accompanied by cramping in my abdomen that could signal the beginning of diabetic ketoacidosis. Since this afternoon, I admit my voice sounding weak and strained. Maybe earlier, but it's gotten worse in the last few hours. Dad's expression shifts to something I've never seen before, a combination of protective fury and desperate determination. He turns to face his wife with an intensity that makes the air in the kitchen feel charged with electricity. "Linda, what the hell were you thinking? She needs insulin, not whatever quack remedies you found online." "Those quack remedies," Linda responds with icy precision, "are natural healing protocols that have helped thousands of people reverse autoimmune conditions. Emma's symptoms are normal detoxification responses. Her body is finally free to heal itself without pharmaceutical interference." The detoxification narrative she's maintained all day suddenly sounds ridiculous when spoken in front of someone with medical knowledge. Dad's insurance work has required him to understand basic medical terminology and treatment protocols, making him less susceptible to alternative medicine marketing language than Linda apparently expected. "Detoxification," his voice rises with incredulity. "Linda, she has type 1 diabetes. Her pancreas doesn't produce insulin. This isn't about toxins or healing, it's about basic biochemistry. Without insulin, she's going to go into ketoacidosis and die." The word die hangs in the air between them like a physical presence, making real the stakes that Linda has been downplaying all day. For the first time since this morning, doubt flickers across her features as she processes the bluntness of his statement. "People with diabetes lived for thousands of years before insulin was invented," she argues, but her voice lacks the conviction it carried earlier. "The human body knows how to heal itself if we stop interfering with synthetic chemicals. People with type 1 diabetes died within months before insulin was discovered," Dad responds immediately. "They wasted away and went into comas and died because their bodies couldn't process glucose without the hormone their pancreas stopped making. That's not healing, Linda. That's death." The historical facts hit like hammer blows against her carefully constructed narrative. She spent hours reading testimonials and alternative medicine websites that promised hope and healing, but she never researched the actual medical history of diabetes treatment or the outcomes for untreated patients. My phone, which Linda turned off earlier, suddenly springs to life as Dad powers it back on. Immediately it starts buzzing with missed calls and text messages from Jessica, my lab partner, even my chemistry professor who apparently heard from someone that I might be having a family emergency. The outside world has been trying to reach me while I've been trapped in this medical nightmare. Look at this, Dad says, showing Linda the screen full of notifications. Emma's friends have been worried sick about her. They know something's wrong because healthy people don't just disappear without explanation. Linda's reaction to the messages is immediate and defensive. Their codependent relationships built around her illness, she insists. Once Emma is truly healthy, once she no longer needs constant medical management, she'll see which friendships were genuine and which were based on her role as a patient. The paranoid reasoning that sounded almost plausible when directed at me alone becomes obviously delusional when heard by someone outside her echo chamber. Dad stares at his wife as if seeing her for the first time, recognition dawning that this isn't just misguided concern but something approaching mental illness. Linda, listen to yourself, he says quietly. You're talking about Emma's friends like they're part of some conspiracy. These are kids who care about her welfare, who've learned to recognize when she's in medical trouble. That's not codependency, that's friendship. The kitchen feels like a courtroom where Linda's carefully constructed case for natural healing is being systematically dismantled by someone who understands both medical reality and normal human relationships. Her supplements and testimonials, which seem so convincing in isolation, appear fragile and inadequate when exposed to critical examination. Jessica's most recent text message is particularly direct. Emma, I called your dad and he said he's driving home to check on you. I also called the campus health center to ask about your medical history in case we need to get you help quickly. Please just let me know you're alive. She called the health center. Linda's voice carries genuine alarm for the first time all day. She's involving medical professionals without permission. That's a complete violation of privacy. She's trying to help someone she cares about, Dad responds firmly. Someone who disappeared without explanation and isn't responding to communication attempts. That's what good friends do when they're worried about each other's safety. The distinction between appropriate concern and boundary violation is lost on Linda, whose worldview has become so distorted that normal expressions of friendship appear threatening. But Dad's presence is forcing her to defend positions that sound increasingly irrational when spoken aloud to someone outside her medical delusion. My vision is becoming seriously compromised now, words blurring together unless I focus intensely on reading them. The neurological symptoms of severe hyperglycemia are progressing rapidly, and I'm approaching the point where cognitive function becomes impaired enough to affect decision-making ability. Dad, I whisper, my voice barely audible above their argument. I think I need to go to the hospital. The words stop their conversation immediately, both parents turning to focus on me with expressions of alarm and concern. Linda's face shows the first genuine worry I've seen all day, as if my direct request for medical intervention has finally penetrated her alternative medicine fog. Of course we're going to the hospital, Dad says immediately, already reaching for his car keys. We should have gone hours ago. Wait, Linda interjects, moving to block his path to the door. Just wait, let me take her blood pressure, check her temperature, assess her symptoms properly. I'm a trained nurse. I can determine if this is a true emergency or just anxiety about trying natural healing. The offer to perform medical assessment reveals how completely she's failed to understand the situation's gravity. Blood pressure and temperature readings can't determine blood glucose levels or ketone production. Without proper diabetes monitoring equipment, her nursing skills are irrelevant to evaluating my current condition. Linda, step away from the door. Dad's voice carries a warning I've never heard before. Our daughter needs immediate medical attention and you're not going to prevent her from getting it. I'm trying to protect her from unnecessary pharmaceutical intervention, she responds desperately. Once we get to the hospital, they'll pump her full of insulin and synthetic chemicals. They'll undo 13 hours of natural detoxification. The detoxification she's describing is actually 13 hours of steadily climbing blood sugar that's approaching life-threatening levels. Her reframing of medical
emergency as healing progress has become so complete that she can't recognize obvious signs of deterioration, even when they're pointed out directly. Dad pushes past her toward the door, his patience finally exhausted. We're going to Aurora Medical Center right now. You can come with us or you can stay here, but Emma is getting proper medical treatment tonight. The ultimatum forces Linda to choose between maintaining her natural healing stance and accompanying her daughter to receive the pharmaceutical intervention she's been fighting against all day. The choice reveals the fundamental contradiction in her position: genuine concern for my welfare versus ideological opposition to conventional medicine. Part 7. The true motive during the tense drive to Aurora Medical Center, with Dad gripping the steering wheel and Linda sitting rigidly in the passenger seat. The real story behind my mother's medical intervention finally begins to emerge. The silence in the car is broken only by my increasingly labored breathing and the occasional direction from Dad's GPS system navigating us through late-night traffic. "I lost another patient last month," Linda suddenly says, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. Mrs. Henderson, 73 years old, diabetic for 20 years. She came into the hospital with what should have been a routine medication adjustment, but she developed complications from the insulin protocol. Kidney problems, circulation issues, infection at the injection site that wouldn't heal. Dad's hands tighten on the steering wheel, but he doesn't respond immediately. I realize this is the first time I'm hearing about Linda's specific experiences during her final months as a nurse, the cases that apparently convinced her that conventional diabetes treatment was more harmful than helpful. "The doctors kept increasing her medications," Linda continues, her voice gaining strength as she builds her narrative. "More insulin, different types of insulin, additional drugs to manage the side effects of the first drugs. She was on 12 different prescriptions by the time she died. 12 chemicals flowing through her system every day, and still her condition kept deteriorating." The story she's telling represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how chronic disease progression works, interpreting the natural advancement of diabetes complications as evidence of pharmaceutical harm rather than inadequate glucose control over decades. But her emotional investment in this interpretation is obvious, driving her desperate attempt to save me from what she perceives as medical mistreatment. Mrs. Henderson's daughter blamed the medications, Linda says, turning to look at me in the back seat. She said her mother was healthier before all the pharmaceutical interventions, that the treatments were killing her faster than the disease itself. And when I looked at the medical literature, when I really researched what these drugs do to the human body over time, I realized she was right. The research she's describing almost certainly involved cherry-picked studies and alternative medicine websites rather than comprehensive review of diabetes treatment outcomes. But her nursing background provided just enough medical knowledge to make her feel qualified to reinterpret complex clinical data according to her emotional needs. "So this is about Mrs. Henderson?" Dad asks, his voice carefully controlled. "You're risking Emma's life because one of your patients had complications from long-term diabetes." "It's not about one patient," Linda responds defensively. "It's about a pattern I started noticing once I began paying attention. Young people like Emma, diagnosed with diabetes in childhood, spending their entire lives dependent on pharmaceutical companies. Never getting better, never achieving real health, just managing symptoms with increasingly complex medication regimens. The pattern she's identified ignores the fundamental difference between managing an incurable autoimmune condition and treating diseases that might be reversible through lifestyle modifications. Type 1 diabetes isn't a condition that gets better in the sense of being cured. It's a condition that's successfully managed through insulin replacement therapy that prevents complications and allows normal life expectancy. Emma has been incredibly healthy for 8 years," Dad points out, taking the exit toward the hospital. "Her A1C levels are excellent, she's never had serious complications, she maintains normal activities and academic performance. How is that evidence of pharmaceutical harm?" "Because she's not truly healthy," Linda insists, her voice rising with frustration. "She's artificially maintained on synthetic chemicals. Her body has never had the chance to heal itself naturally, to restore its own glucose regulation mechanisms. She's been kept in a state of pharmaceutical dependence since she was 14 years old." The artificial distinction between insulin therapy and natural health reveals how completely she's embraced alternative medicine messaging about synthetic versus natural treatments. "The insulin keeping me alive is bioidentical to what my pancreas would produce if it were functioning normally, but she's reframed it as a foreign chemical preventing my body from healing itself. My nausea is becoming severe now, waves of sickness that make speaking difficult and concentration nearly impossible. The abdominal cramping has intensified to the point where sitting upright in the car seat causes significant discomfort. These are classic symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis progressing toward the point where immediate medical intervention becomes necessary to prevent permanent organ damage or death." "She's getting worse," Dad observes, glancing at me in the rearview mirror with obvious alarm. "Linda, look at her. Does this look like natural healing to you? Linda turns to assess my condition, and for a moment I see genuine medical concern flicker across her features as her nursing training recognizes obvious signs of distress. But then her expression hardens again, with that familiar stubborn determination. Detoxification often gets worse before it gets better, she says, though her voice lacks the confidence it carried earlier. The body has to purge accumulated toxins before healing can begin. What you're seeing are withdrawal symptoms from pharmaceutical dependence, not evidence of medical emergency. The withdrawal narrative has become her explanation for everything, a catch-all theory that explains away obvious deterioration as evidence of progress toward health. No amount of contrary evidence can penetrate this framework, because symptoms that contradict her expectations get reinterpreted as confirmation that the process is working. There's the hospital, Dad says with obvious relief, pointing toward the familiar blue signs marking Aurora Medical Center's emergency entrance. We're going to get Emma proper medical attention, and then we're going to have a serious conversation about your mental health, Linda. The mention of her mental health triggers immediate defensive anger. My mental health? I'm the only one in this family with medical training. I'm the only one who's bothered to research alternatives to pharmaceutical dependence. But because I'm not willing to blindly follow conventional medicine protocols, suddenly I'm mentally ill. The defensive response reveals how invested she's become in her role as Emma's medical advocate, how central this natural healing crusade has become to her identity and self-worth. Admitting that her intervention was wrong would require acknowledging that her nursing expertise led her to endanger her daughter's life, a psychological burden that might be too heavy to bear. Dad pulls into the emergency room parking area, stopping directly in front of the ambulance bay where bright lights illuminate the automatic doors leading into the hospital. The familiar sight of the medical facility where I was first diagnosed 8 years ago feels both comforting and terrifying, representing safety and crisis simultaneously. I'm not going in there, Linda announces suddenly, her voice carrying a finality that surprises both Dad and me. I won't be part of forcing Emma back into pharmaceutical dependence. If you want to undo 13 hours of natural healing, you'll have to do it without my participation. The ultimatum reveals the depth of her commitment to alternative medicine ideology, her willingness to abandon her daughter at a medical facility, rather than compromise her beliefs about natural healing. It's a choice between family unity and ideological purity, and she's choosing to maintain her position rather than support my medical treatment. Fine, Dad responds immediately, already moving to help me out of the car. Stay in the parking lot if that's what you need to do. But Emma is getting the insulin she needs to survive, and your opposition isn't going to change that. The confrontation has finally forced Linda to reveal the true stakes of her intervention. This isn't just about my health or pharmaceutical companies or natural healing. This is about her need to be right about alternative medicine, her psychological investment in proving that conventional diabetes treatment is unnecessary and harmful. As Dad helps me toward the emergency room entrance, my legs unsteady and my vision seriously compromised, I realize that my mother's love has become indistinguishable from medical neglect. Her desperate need to save me from pharmaceutical dependence has transformed into willingness to let me die, rather than admit that insulin therapy is necessary for my survival. The automatic doors slide open with a mechanical whisper, and the familiar smell of hospital disinfectant hits me like a promise of safety. Someone here will understand that type 1 diabetes requires insulin replacement therapy, that supplements can't cure autoimmune conditions, that 13 hours without medication has put me in serious medical danger. Behind us in the parking lot, Linda sits alone in the car, choosing ideological consistency over family unity. The woman who taught me to manage my diabetes has become someone who would rather watch me die than admit that modern medicine saved my life. Part 8. The strategic withdrawal. The emergency room triage nurse takes one look at my appearance and immediately escorts us to a treatment room, bypassing the usual waiting area entirely. Her questions are rapid and specific. When did I last take insulin? What are my typical blood glucose ranges? Have I been vomiting or experiencing abdominal pain? The clinical efficiency feels like salvation after 13 hours of medical gaslighting. Blood glucose is 487, the nurse announces after checking my fingerstick sample, her voice carrying the controlled alarm of someone who recognizes a serious medical emergency. We need ketone levels immediately, and IV access for fluid resuscitation. The number hits like a physical blow. Normal blood glucose ranges from 70 to 140. Mine is more than 3 times the upper limit of what's considered safe. At this level, my blood has become thick and syrupy, my organs struggling to function in an environment they weren't designed to handle. Sarah Williams appears within minutes, a calm presence who introduces herself, while simultaneously examining my eyes with a pen light and listening to my heart rate. Emma, you're in diabetic ketoacidosis, she explains matter-of-factly. We're going to start an insulin drip immediately and get your blood chemistry back to normal levels. The diagnosis I've been dreading all day finally spoken aloud by someone with medical authority. Diabetic ketoacidosis, the potentially fatal complication that occurs when blood glucose reaches dangerous levels and the body begins breaking down fat and protein for energy, producing toxic acids that can damage organs and cause coma or death. Dad stands beside my hospital bed, looking simultaneously relieved and furious, his hands shaking slightly as the magnitude of what could have happened becomes clear. 13 hours, he keeps repeating. 13 hours without insulin. What if we hadn't gotten here in time? DKA can progress rapidly, Dr. Williams responds honestly, while adjusting my IV line. Untreated, it can cause permanent organ damage or death within 24 to 48 hours. You got her here just in time. The timeline makes my blood run cold. If Linda had succeeded in her plan to keep me away from medical treatment for 72 hours, if Dad hadn't driven home early from his conference, if Jessica hadn't been persistent in her attempts to reach me, I could have died from a completely preventable medical emergency. Through the treatment room window, I can see Linda still sitting in Dad's car in the parking lot, her silhouette rigid with stubborn determination. She's chosen to remain outside rather than witness the pharmaceutical intervention that's literally saving my life, maintaining her ideological purity, while her daughter receives the medical treatment she tried to prevent. I need to call Jessica, I tell Dad, accepting my phone back now that Linda's communication restrictions no longer apply. She's been worried sick all day, and she deserves to know what happened. Jessica answers on the first ring, her voice tight with concern, that immediately transforms into relief when she hears me speaking. Emma, oh thank God, I've been going crazy trying to figure out what was wrong. Are you okay? Your dad said something about a family emergency. The family emergency euphemism feels inadequate to describe what actually happened, but explaining that my mother attempted to cure my diabetes with supplements while preventing access to insulin seems too surreal for normal conversation. I'm in the hospital, I say simply. Diabetic ketoacidosis. My mom destroyed my medication this morning because she thought natural healing could cure my diabetes. Silence stretches across the phone line as Jessica processes this information. She destroyed your insulin. Emma, that could have killed you. That's not family emergency, that's medical abuse. The term medical abuse cuts through the confusion and emotional manipulation I've been experiencing all day. What happened wasn't misguided concern or alternative medicine exploration. It was deliberate interference with life-sustaining medical treatment by someone who should have protected my health rather than endangering it. The important thing is that you're getting proper treatment now. Jessica continues, her voice carrying the kind of practical concern that's been missing from my interactions all day. Do you need anything? Can I bring you clothes or textbooks or anything from your room? The offer of normal support for a normal medical situation feels almost overwhelming after hours of being treated like a pharmaceutical addict in need of intervention rather than a diabetes patient requiring standard medical care. Someone finally recognizes that I'm sick because I was denied necessary medication, not because I've been taking too much of it. Dr. Williams returns with lab results that confirm the severity of my condition. Your ketone levels are significantly elevated, she explains, showing me numbers on a computer screen. We'll need to monitor you closely for the next several hours to make sure your body chemistry stabilizes properly. The monitoring will involve hourly blood draws, frequent vital sign checks, and careful observation for signs of complications like cerebral edema or cardiac arrhythmias that can occur during treatment for severe DKA. It's the kind of intensive medical supervision that contradicts everything Linda claimed about diabetes being manageable through natural methods. How long will I need to stay here? I ask, thinking about my organic chemistry exam on Thursday and the research proposal that's due next week. Probably 24 to 48 hours, Dr. Williams responds. DKA recovery takes time, and we need to make sure your glucose levels stabilize before discharging you. Your professors will understand. This was a genuine medical emergency.
The academic accommodations I'll need feel secondary to the relief of being in medical hands that understand my condition and have the tools to treat it properly. But the thought of explaining to my organic chemistry professor that I missed the exam because my mother tried to cure my diabetes with cinnamon supplements seems almost impossibly surreal. Dad's phone rings, showing Linda's number on the caller ID. He stares at it for several rings before answering, his expression grim with the knowledge that this conversation will determine the future of their marriage. Linda Emma is stable, but she's in diabetic ketoacidosis. The doctor says we got her here just in time. I can't hear her response, but Dad's face cycles through expressions of disbelief, anger, and profound sadness, as she apparently continues defending her natural healing intervention despite the medical evidence of its nearly fatal consequences. No, Linda, he says firmly. The supplements didn't help. They can't help. Emma's pancreas doesn't produce insulin, and without insulin replacement therapy, she develops ketoacidosis and dies. That's not pharmaceutical propaganda. That's basic biochemistry. The conversation continues for several minutes, with Dad's responses becoming increasingly curt as Linda apparently refuses to acknowledge that her intervention created a medical emergency rather than promoting healing. Finally, he hangs up without saying goodbye, his face etched with the exhaustion of someone who's realized his wife has lost touch with reality. She's still insisting that the hospital treatment is interfering with Emma's natural healing process, he tells me, his voice hollow with disbelief. She thinks the DKA diagnosis is a fabrication designed to justify pharmaceutical intervention. The conspiracy thinking has become so entrenched that even objective medical evidence gets reinterpreted as part of an elaborate deception. Linda's need to be right about natural healing has overcome her ability to process information that contradicts her beliefs, making rational discussion about my medical condition impossible. A social worker appears at my bedside, introducing herself as part of the hospital's standard protocol for cases involving medical neglect of chronic conditions. Her questions are gentle but direct. Has this happened before? Do I feel safe at home? Am I aware of resources for young adults dealing with family interference with medical care? This is the first time, I explain, though the qualifier feels inadequate given the severity of what occurred. My mom has been getting interested in alternative medicine lately, but I never thought she'd actually destroy my medication. The social worker takes detailed notes about the timeline of events, Linda's nursing background, and the family dynamics that led to this crisis. Her documentation will become part of my medical record, creating an official trail of what happened and potentially protecting other patients from similar interventions. Medical abuse by family members is more common than people realize, she explains, especially when the family member has some medical training that makes them feel qualified to make treatment decisions. We'll provide you with resources for maintaining medical autonomy and dealing with family pressure about healthcare choices. The resources she's describing include legal information about medical decision-making rights for young adults, counseling services for dealing with family conflict over health choices, and support groups for people whose families reject conventional medical treatment. It's a whole infrastructure for problems I never knew existed. Dr. Williams returns with updated lab results, showing improvement in my ketone levels and blood chemistry. The insulin drip is working well, she reports with satisfaction. Your body is responding appropriately to treatment. We should have you back to normal glucose ranges within the next few hours. The word normal feels like a promise of return to the life I had before this morning's medical nightmare began. Normal blood sugar levels, normal academic schedule, normal relationships with people who understand that diabetes requires insulin therapy, rather than supplement protocols downloaded from alternative medicine websites. Through the window, I can see that Linda's car is gone from the parking lot. She's apparently driven home, rather than remaining at the hospital while I receive the medical treatment that's saving my life. The symbolism is clear. She's chosen ideological consistency over family support, maintaining her natural healing beliefs, rather than acknowledging the medical emergency her intervention created. Dad notices my attention to the empty parking lot. She said she couldn't watch them pump you full of chemicals, he explains, his voice carrying profound sadness. She's convinced that every dose of insulin is making you sicker rather than saving your life. The delusion has become so complete that watching successful medical treatment feels like witnessing harm rather than healing. Linda's investment in alternative medicine has reached the point where evidence contradicting her beliefs becomes invisible, making her incapable of recognizing that insulin therapy is restoring my health rather than destroying it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.